behind me were the headquarters for the World War II Office of Strategic Service. It was here that the first halting steps toward mind control began.
So 10 years before Stanley Kubrick made The Shining, he made another film. It was a film about mind control called A Clockwork Orange.
The Shining is one movie that has really been put through the ringer, and one thing that people really don't notice, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
All during the shoot, Kubrick is rewriting the movie.
What we see here is Stanley Kubrick trying to encode a secret meaning into The Shining that he doesn't want anyone to know about.
Kubrick has several references to Freemasonry in his films.
There's a lady that walks past that has a bloody handprint on her ass.
The Shining is Kubrick's 11th film, and there's 11s all through the film. 11 is a special number in occult theology.
The Shining has been regarded as one of the greatest horror films ever made. But is it really a horror film?
The Shining also is loaded with sexual innuendo.
The family is isolated up at the Overlook, which is a perfect opportunity for some sort of CIA experimentation to go down up there.
Using MK-Ultra methods, psychiatrically control assassins. Literally assassins.
Experimental drugs, including LSD, were administered to human guinea pigs. The patients were never told that their treatment was part of a CIA experiment.
And there is this story which involves him spiking the drinks of one of his deputies, this guy Frank Olson, and he jumped out of a window to his death.
It's a demonic possession, you know, so it makes someone feel like they don't have any control over this etherical entity outside themselves, when really it's the people who are imposing the trauma that need to be held accountable for the action.
Mr. Thomas.
We know what happened in the apartment that they had.
There are many clues that point to the fact that this theory of what The Shining is really about is the correct theory.
We think that we're watching a horror movie where ghosts are kind of forcing a man to go off and kill his family, but what are we really watching here?
Welcome to the Hotel California.
Wendy, I'm home.
Welcome back to another wonderful Raised by Giants discussion. We are live. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys. We're starting a little early here today. Welcome any moderators or channel members out there today. And the good news is my new documentary, A Clockwork Shining, will be released at the end of the month. I put so much work into that film. Our guest here, Ryan, knows how much work I put into it, and I didn't hardly talk to anyone for over a month. I didn't watch anything, didn't hardly scroll through any social media, because I put all my attention into making this movie. And that's how I am when I get my mind set on something. I don't want to stop until it's done, but it definitely took a toll on me, and I'm actually still recovering from it as we speak. I'm almost back to 100%. But it was a doozy, folks, but it's definitely going to pay off. It's the best thing that I have ever made, and it is the best thing that I've ever been a part of. And so I really hope everyone watches it when it gets released on Amazon Prime at the end of the month. I'll keep everyone updated on exactly when that drops. Also, I've had quite a few people over the last couple of days get pretty upset about the ads on my audio only version of the show. So if you guys don't know, the show is also uploaded to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and anywhere else you can listen to a podcast on. And the same show that I do here on YouTube is also on those platforms. And if you're interested in checking those out, just type in Raised by Giants and you'll find it. So people have been complaining about the amount of ads on the audio only version of the show. in which I have absolutely no control over. Right, the way that it works is you upload your show to Spreaker. Spreaker then distributes that out to all the other platforms, right? And they place the ads into the show. I literally have no control over how many ads get placed in the show or where they get placed, just like I have no control over the YouTube ads either. They changed the policy around 6 months ago to just straight up monetization or not monetization. So the creator has absolutely no say in where the ads are, how many ads there, or how many ads appear, right? So, I mean, the ads really don't do that much. It really doesn't. It's very, very little. Here, I'll actually show you guys a little thing here really quickly because I actually think it's important for you guys to realize. Okay, so this is the estimated revenue for this month. $40.90. Whoo, man, we are raking in the cash, baby. Raking in that $40.90. That's what's up. That's on YouTube right there. Okay, and I'll actually show you a breakdown of what the shows actually do, which is wild here. Hold on. Okay, so this is from my last show with Wayne Steiger. Okay, you go down here to analytics. Estimated revenue for that show that has almost 1,000 views is $3.19. That's it. Which is like, that's what minimum wage was in like the late 70s, was like $3.10. Okay, in 1979, minimum wage was $3.10. So I do 3 shows a week, sometimes, mostly like 2 shows a week here. So if I were to calculate, let's just use that as the base here, $3.19. If I did 3 shows and let's say the standard was 1,000 views and I was making $3.19, that's like $35 a month that I'm making. It's literally nothing. So I just thought I would give you guys a little perspective on there that I have no control over the ads. I can't control when they're placed. I can't control how many of them there are. Okay, so if I were to get more super chats and more super stickers during the shows that I do, I would just completely not even put any ads in any of the shows. You guys can just not even have to worry about it. But I don't. So unfortunately, that's just the way that it has to be. But I appreciate each and every one of you guys, especially the members. The members really help out the revenue from the show. So thank you guys and all the members that pay that monthly subscription and get bonus content every month, which I'm going to be releasing a new members only episode here very soon. But with that down and that little rant over, we have with us here today, we have the author and veteran radio personality and the producer of the show, The Secret Teachings, on groundzero.radio, broadcasting live from Japan, Ryan Gable. Welcome back to the show. How's it going, my friend?
It's going good, Ryder. Thanks for having me back on the show. It's a really good trailer. I went to film school, so I think I would know as an expert. It's a lot of hard work.
Oh my gosh, dude, it's been crazy. It's so difficult. And I think if people knew how much time and energy and effort, I mean, even into doing the show, dude, it takes so much time. And I mean, you do a show like every single day, bro. Like, I don't even know how the amount of energy and time and study that it takes to do this. People think that we just sit behind here and just talk about random stuff. But we don't. Like, it takes time and effort and energy into researching all this stuff. And like time is energy, right? And energy is, it feels like there's not an exchange of that energy. I'm not trying to get spiritual or metaphysical here, but you would think that you would either grow from it in some kind of way, which we do grow personally, but you would think that something would have to give there, but it doesn't seem like anything's giving. What's your experience with that?
I think I've had a similar experience. I think I've done it for so long that something has given, but not much has given. However, what has given has been enough to sustain me, so I can be grateful for that. However, I will say that it's peculiar the math that Apple, the company Apple, it's peculiar the math that Apple has, like the math that they use. I think it's the same kind of math that was used on Building 7, where 2 planes, hit 2 buildings and 3 buildings collapse. Because Apple has this new math that they use for determining what your ratings are. And not only has my show been removed from Apple, so I've had to rebuild my profile there, but I've gotten, I don't know, probably a little bit like 10, 11, 12, like close to a dozen recent 5-star reviews. No 1-star reviews, but I got a bad like written review, one. And somehow with like almost a dozen 5-star reviews and one bad review, my numbers went down. I don't know how that math works out. It's very rigged. I think not just against you or I. It's rigged against everybody. It's anybody who tries to do something, unless you're part of a system, part of a group, or you have a lot of money to put into it to begin with.
That's what's so wild, and that's what's really important about this documentary, because it really kind of, A Clockwork Shining, it gets into that, and mostly about revolving around the music industry and how the music industry is all rigged with military people and sons and daughters of high-ranking military personnel. It's wild when you look at it. It's like, well, these people can't, like a normal everyday person, it's very difficult for them to actually become popular because the entire system has been rigged against them.
Oh
I
yeah,
just made a post about this today, actually, because I made a really good meme, a really good Trump meme that I sent you that had South Park spliced into it, and it's really funny. Should have went viral. It did horrible, and I'm like, well, if this was anybody else posting this, it would blow up instantly. It have millions of views, and there's proof of that in the meme that I did during the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, when I did the Pineapple Express meme. I made that. It was my idea. And then the next day, it did horrible. No one hardly watched it. And then the next day, I seen someone else do the exact same thing, or, rip off my idea, and it had millions of views.
Mm. That happens in radio a lot, where people. Well, I watch people do this to Alex Jones. Alex Jones says something, and then a bunch of podcasters just repeat the exact same thing, and then they have viral videos as well. It's the same thing happens with Clyde. People will rip Clyde's show off. His show is very unique, so people will rip his ideas off like 6 months later and say, "This is an idea I had." It's like, Clyde talked about that 6 months ago. Or that happens to me. I'll talk about something a year ago, and then someone will come out and say, have a show, like they talk about whatever I talked about, and they'll say, "This is my idea. This is new." It's like, I talked about that 12 months ago. It happens a lot. And it's not a matter of people taking ideas or sharing ideas. It's just a matter of the algorithm is extremely manipulatable. And I think a lot of people either pay, or they just accidentally sometimes touch on key things that are trending, and then things go viral. But I think more often than not, all the big shows and all the big personalities that are pushed, they're pushed. It's all very, very intentional. It creates a narrative. And I think that goes for the mainstream, the alternative, and then even some quote unquote independent media as well.
I agree, but I don't want to get on the soapbox, because then people will complain that all we did was complain the entire episode. Like how people do. Oh, there's Grumpy on there complaining about blah, 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 like they always do. But anyway, we're here to talk about Japan, because I think Japan is a very interesting topic. And how long have you been in Japan now?
1 month today, actually. Japan time, 1 month today, 1 month tomorrow, your time. So whole month.
What have you experienced there? I mean, I'm sure that you knew that it was going to be different, socially and economically and everything. I'm sure you did a lot of study before you went, because we've talked about it a few times on the show. But what is the biggest thing that stood out to you between the difference between Japan and the United States? Because I've always thought that it's interesting that the United States literally gets zero information on what any other country is doing. We don't know what's going on there. We don't know how their government operates. We don't know how they are socially, how they are politically.
Unless they
Nothing.
have unless they have resources, and then we spread rumors about how horrible their government is, and we have to overthrow their government so we can get the resources. Then we hear about how horrible the country is. But
That's
yeah,
right. It's only if it's negative or something as bad as going on there, and then we all hear about it. Yeah. So what's we'll start with the positives because I'm sure there's some negatives as well. I mean, no place is perfect, right? But let's start with the positives that you've seen in the way that, even in the way that people interact with each other, because I think that that's important as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to this whole perspective that I've obtained being over here in Japan. I will first of all say though that yes, I studied the culture for several years, probably a solid 3 years. I studied the language for 2 years. There are two different scripts. Well, technically three scripts. There's hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Kanji is like Chinese characters, and that's incorporated into the language. Katakana is a language using characters to spell out English words, specifically English words. And then hiragana is kind of the main Japanese language. So I studied that for a long time, which made it very, very comforting when I came over here and I could read some things, some signs, and knowing that, well, I'm not totally lost because Japan is a very foreign country. I mean, it's very westernized, but it's a very foreign country because when you look around, you don't see those English characters everywhere. You know, if you went to France or if you went to some European country, even if you don't speak the language, at least they use the same kind of alphabet. Not the case here, obviously. There are quite a few signs that have English writing on them if you're in a train station or if you're in or you're at a bus stop or if you're maybe taking something like a cable car in a tourist area, you'll see that there's English. And sometimes people do speak English. Most Japanese learn at least basic English when they're in school, which is something I've always heard about Europeans. They learn other languages when they're in school. And although we have the option in the United States, I don't think a lot of Americans can speak more than one language. And sometimes it feels like Americans can't even speak English properly. But when you learn a language too, it's also, you learn the pronunciation. So you'll find that there are some people here that speak English and they speak it better, more proper than native English speakers, in the same way that there are plenty of people that learn Japanese. And if they really study it hard enough, they might pronounce things more accurately than native Japanese speakers. It's like that with any language. So the first thing I noticed because I studied the language was that I could understand a few things, like very basic things. Like I have a water bottle here, and I can read some of the script on the water bottle, so that makes me feel really good. Like, oh, that all that studying wasn't worthless. It was worth something, and I did the right thing. With that being said, it can get really scary when you are trying to find a bus or when you're trying to find a train. And if you don't have Google Maps or some other similar map system, and even with Google Maps or a similar map system, sometimes it thinks you're on the other side of the road. So you get on the wrong side of the road, which can really twist your perception of where you are because they drive on a different side of the road here than in the United States. So not only are they driving on the other side of the road compared to how we drive, but then Google Maps messes things up and it thinks you're on the right side when you're on the left side, so it tells you the bus stop is here rather than there. So that's something you have to get used to, that the map's not always accurate. And a lot of times buses they're not numbered in the same way. It depends on what city you're in. So a lot of buses, it'll have the name of the bus, maybe where it's going, but it's all in kanji. So it's like reading Chinese, and I screenshot it and then put it in a translator to see what it says, and hopefully, I can get to the right bus stop. But I've been here a month, and I've learned how to get around more easily and become more accustomed to things. So that's really the first thing I noticed, is that if you study the language of any country you go to, it makes it feel less foreign. So that's how it feels to me. However, Japan is still an incredibly foreign place, And although I love America, I wrote an American history book. I majored in American history, advanced placement American history. Um, I would say that overall, my initial and my continuing perception of Japan is that I think Japan, even though I was born in 1991, I think Japan today, not necessarily in the past, not necessarily in the future, but today, Japan is kind of what the US was back in like the 1970s and 1980s. There's a lot of problems right now with the Japanese yen, and the US dollar is much stronger. So basically, Japan is on sale if you have USD, if you have US currency. But if you make Japanese yen, they are experiencing inflation and problems here economically, and things are perhaps cheaper to an American, but to a Japanese person or anybody, if you're even if you're American that lives here and makes Japanese yen, things are expensive, and things are similar in economic terms, similar to what's happening in the United States. Maybe not as severe, but definitely connected to the US dollar like every country is. So there's that as well. But Japan's kind of like the US in the 1970s and 80s in the sense that things, and maybe even back to the 1950s, that kind of iconic Americana image that we have of the 1950s. Japan's kind of like that. Like most people that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to a lot of people, I ask people questions when I do realize someone can speak English, even if it's just a little bit. People here culturally, women are far more traditional, like 1950s US traditional. Most women, at least I guess, in the general scheme of things, not everybody, of course, are more housewife. They want to be housewives. They want to get married to someone who can support them. That's the general. I've talked to Japanese women, just people I know also that I'm just friends with, that tell me that that's the general theme. It's not universal, of course, but it's general. And I think in the United States, it's the opposite. Generally, at least in my experience, people don't want that kind of thing anymore. And it's kind of a minority of people that want the traditional kind of, relationship. But it's more than just relationships and dating. It's just in general, Japan feels like a United States back in maybe the 50s in some respects, maybe the 80s in terms of technology, and in terms of the way that things are run here. I mean, these are just my impressions. You can't quantify them. Uh, the thing that I like the most, though, is that Japan is clean and it is safe. And if you don't know anything about the language, you don't know anything about the culture, when you come here, you will realize as soon as you get out of the airport and go to the train station that it is incredibly safe and it's incredibly clean. The first night I flew into Narita Airport, took a train to a part of Tokyo called Ebisu, where I was staying, actually named after one of the first created deities in the Japanese mythology, Ebisu. And I was walking down the street, Ryder, and I was thinking, this is kind of scary. It's like 10 p.m. at night. I don't know where I am. I can't read any of the signs. And I walked, there's a lot of back alleys. Everything's crammed together anywhere you go, especially in Tokyo. And I see somebody in the distance walking toward me down an alley. And my instinct is this person's going to rob me. They're going to stab me. They're going to shoot me. I've been through so much crime in the United States everywhere I've lived, people breaking into my house, pulling guns on me, knives. I've seen my neighbor get shot and killed. Like I've seen a lot of stuff in the US. So that's my reaction. And then as I get closer to the person, it's like some 12-year-old girl by herself walking down a dark alley at 10 p.m. at night. And you see that all the time. There's like literally 5-year-old kids that will take trains by themselves, that will go shopping by themselves, maybe because their parents work at night. But like some grocery stores, convenience stores, they have tiny baskets for kids, and they have little tiny, maybe shopping carts for kids, and they put children's stuff on the low levels because kids will go shopping by themselves with no adults here. They will take trains and buses by themselves with no adults here. It is unbelievably safe. You still want to be careful, especially if you're in Shinjuku in Tokyo, which is a very tourist area, a lot of prostitution, red light district. Or if you're in parts of Osaka, there are gangs that have guns, but they leave tourists alone. And it's, in comparison, it's the safest feeling I've ever had in my life. I mean, I feel safer here with my door unlocked than I feel in the US with a gun with my door locked. If that makes any sense. You can
What
feel how safe it is.
what's the primary mode of transportation there? Is it normally buses and trains? And also, how do people live there? Do they like live in houses, or is it
Mm.
condos slash apartments? What's the living situation like there?
It depends on where you go. Most of the population, the majority live in Tokyo. I think it's like 60%. I think it's like 60%. I'd have to look that up again, but the majority live in Tokyo, which is the biggest city in the world. So Tokyo has limited space, of course, and famously very small apartments, very small condos. There aren't really houses. You don't see houses unless you go on the very far outskirts, or you go to Chiba, which is east of Tokyo. It's all like apartments, condos, high-rise buildings, things like that. Very, very, very small. You go to the countryside, take the train, for example, go between cities, and you see the passing countryside farms and things like that. You'll see a lot of houses that are, I mean, they're just like a normal American size. They're different architecture, but American size house, like a normal house. So there are plenty of those in the countryside. Certain places I haven't seen them, but people that I know who have family there in Himeji, where the famous Himeji Castle is, a World Heritage Site. There are people there that I think people there have a lot of money, so there are some pretty decent sized houses there. They're just different architecture, different design, different layout. There, of course, is a lot of Western design to many things here. You can get Western apartments, where they don't have anything standard Japanese, except for the fact that they're really small. Um, and in terms of living, like I haven't been to anybody's house, so I don't know. I'm just telling you things that I've heard and things that I've seen. I do know that when it comes to living space, because it is so compact, most places you go and most places anybody would want to live unless they had a lot of money to move out of the city. Uh, People here are very accepting of having limited space and very accepting of having limited things. And it's very customary of Japanese people not to complain, even if they want to complain. So there's a cultural conformity to not complain, to not, make waves and to keep the peace. Especially I think in Hiroshima, the idea of peace for obvious reasons is even more intense than other parts of Japan I've been to. But my point is, I've had a few people that thought that I was in a third world country. Japan is not a third world country. Japan is a first world country, and Japan is one of the top economies in the world, and Japan is extremely westernized, and a lot of people here like America. They like American culture. Baseball's huge here. American TV shows are huge here. I see a lot of Japanese people wearing American, like either companies or baseball teams, football teams. There's a lot of that, especially in Tokyo. But my point is, when it comes to living, to answer your question very simply, it's not common to have washers and dryers in your home. If you have a washer, you probably don't have a dryer. Almost everybody hangs their clothing outside to dry. Um, Air conditioners are not as common here as they are in the United States. And I think that would be a shock. There are three things that would be really shocking to people that come here: the small space, unless you're staying in Airbnbs, hotels, you get air conditioners, but it's not as common to have air conditioners. And I think it would probably be shocking to see that everybody hangs their laundry outside, because in America we just put it in the dryer. And they have dryers here. They're just expensive, and there isn't enough space usually to have them if you don't have a large place to live. So the living conditions are different here, and people are much more accepting of that. And to me, I like that. I like small space, not because someone told me to like it to save the earth. I prefer small space, and I prefer simplicity. So for me, I'm attracted to that. To other people, they would think that it's a problem. And their, last point would be that there are plenty of Japanese people, I'm sure, that don't like it, and they want to have a Western apartment, or they want to have a Western lifestyle. Just like there are people like me in the US who, I don't have to move here to have it, but I can live a simple lifestyle in the US and have a small apartment. And it's just a matter of preference. But you will definitely notice that despite this is a first world country, and very wealthy, and people here are on average very educated, like in my experience here, way more than the average person I speak to in the US. Way more educated and way less arrogant on average. It still is a place where you would be shocked thinking that they're, that they have less because they're poor. They just have less because of the culture and because of the space requirements. It's not because this is a poor place. It's a very wealthy, very clean, very industrial country.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. How the washer and dryer thing. I wouldn't mind that because I don't dry my clothes anyway.
Oh, you don't? You hang them?
No, I hang them. I've always hanged them because I'm so tall and lanky that if I were to dry a short sleeve shirt and it shrinks by a half an inch, it just doesn't fit me anymore.
Mm. Oh, you and I are similar. I don't like that either. I don't like when anything shrinks a little bit. So yeah, hanging your stuff up to dry.
I'm gonna actually kick you out of here and then bring you back in. You're frozen a lot here. See if that makes a difference. There we
Okay,
go.
so the internet here where I am in this hotel is not that it's not that stable.
I mean, it's working. We can still hear you, and everyone can still hear you, but yeah, just freezing a little bit on your video. Colmer wants to know about the demographic there. I would imagine it's predominantly Japanese, correct?
Almost entirely, yeah. You see a lot of tourists, of course, a lot of people from Germany, a lot of Chinese people, a lot of people from mostly people from Europe and China, I would say. But yeah, almost everybody is Japanese. It's a very, very singular country. And immigration here is very difficult. It's not easy to immigrate here. It's not easy to get refugee status here. It's not easy to stay long term unless you have, the proper paperwork, and there's very strict regulations on that. Strict in the sense that it takes a while to get approval. So yeah, it's almost entirely Japanese unless you go to the tourist areas, of course, and then you mostly tourists. But yeah, to answer the question.
Have you seen anybody like from that seems like they're American?
You know what? That's actually a really good question. I have not. I don't think I've seen anybody who I thought was maybe I thought for a second that they were from the U.S., but no. Mostly the people that I've seen are that they're European. Like people, a couple of people I thought were from America, and then they start speaking like French or something. I mean, maybe they are from America. Maybe they just speak French, but you could tell like people are mostly European.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And another interesting thing that you sent me some pictures of some magazines that they have there. But actually, let me tell us about the magazines really quick, and I'll try and bring up a picture because you sent me a couple of pictures.
Yeah. So when I went to Fukushima, which is not the power plant, Fukushima is the prefecture, and then Fukushima is also a city. The Daiichi power plant is about an hour east of the city of Fukushima. So I went to the city of Fukushima because about 20 minutes by car east of the city, there is a museum. And I would say maybe they call it a research facility, kind of like they do in Roswell, and Roswell Museum and Research Facility. So they have something similar like that east of Fukushima in a little town called Ino. And that's because this little town has been plagued with UFO sightings and strange lights for decades. And this museum documents things out of Europe and out of the United States and out of other parts of the world pertaining to UFOs. And they have a lot of stuff about Japanese UFOs, cases in Tokyo or the Utsurobune, which is a famous case from the early 1800s. And you go through this museum and you see all this stuff. So that's why I went to Fukushima. And to answer your question, that story is important because I didn't know anything else about Fukushima except the power plant, which isn't close to the city anyway, and this UFO museum. But when I went to the convenience store, I noticed that they had all these strange magazines, and I got the impression that Fukushima might be kind of like a very weird city where they're interested in very peculiar things. Now, I have looked at other convenience stores, 7-Elevens and others, totally different here than in the US. I've looked at other convenience stores in Tokyo, in Hiroshima, in Himeji, and they have magazines that are, pretty universal. You can get manga, you can get pornography, you can get like bridal magazines, sports magazines. But in Fukushima, to answer your question, they had a lot of magazines pertaining to conspiracies.
Yeah.
UFO,
Reptilians, bro. They love the reptilians there.
yes, Fukushima had all these magazines about how world leaders were reptilians. I thought I think I sent you that picture.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I can't find it. I'm seeing a video that you sent me of a magazine, but I thought for sure you sent me a picture of the reptilian on the cover of one of the
I thought that I did
magazines.
too. Yeah, I thought that I did too. But you can just
This is a
imagine.
video of what one of the magazines looks like. It has a UFO on the front of it.
Yes.
And I
And
think it opens up here, and let me try and move it forward a little bit.
so even in the UFO magazines, there's like advertisements for prostitutes. You'll go from call this number to get a Japanese prostitute to why Queen Elizabeth was an alien, and then you'll turn the page and there's like a ghost story. It's very, very
Oh yeah,
strange.
here's Lord Ashtar.
Hail Lord Ashtar.
Lord Ashtar.
Oh yeah, and they had stuff from the US in there too. There's the Green Monster. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I can't believe I can't find that. Because the cover of it didn't it say something about if Queen Elizabeth was a reptilian? Or am I thinking of something different? You're still on here? Oh, he dropped out. He'll come back in a second. But I thought this was so interesting.
Hey, can you still hear me? I lost connection.
Yeah, I can still hear you. You're good. You just dropped out for a second.
Okay, sorry about that. But yes,
No
it's
problem.
very
So these magazines are like kind of like tabloid magazines, right? They're like what a tabloid magazine would the equivalent of a tabloid magazine in the US.
yeah, it's a Japanese tabloid.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I stood and looked at it for about 15, 20 minutes trying to figure out what it was because of the porn, the ghost stories, the aliens. It was just like a mix of all that stuff.
Have sex with an alien.
Oh yeah, that's one of the stories in the magazine was a guy who lost his virginity to an extraterrestrial. I thought this is right up the UFO cult alley.
It's just so funny because if they were to put, Queen Elizabeth being a reptilian on the cover of any magazine in the United States, people would be all over it. See, I told you it was true.
Yeah. It's a different attitude. You know what I've noticed? I think that like in any country, there are people that are obviously interested in that kind of thing. But we tend to think that UFOs and conspiracies are some kind of America-centric topic. I wonder of the people I've spoken to here, individuals and then also their parents. A lot of parents are opposed to the World Health Organization and the UN having any influence in Japan. There were protests in Tokyo over the WHO treaty. A lot of people here, I think it's part of the culture. They believe in, if not believe fully like a matter of faith, they're open to ghosts and they're open to spirits and they're open to the paranormal. It's kind of culturally customary to think those things because of the Buddhism and the Shintoism. And there's a lot of people here who like aliens and conspiracies, but I wonder how much of that is a result of influence from U.S. media. I think that's where a lot of it comes from.
I would imagine a large percentage of it.
I mean, look at that magazine. Look at those pictures. How much of that stuff is the same UFO crap that we see in the U.S.?
Yeah, and you were saying that they had did they have a statue of the Flatwoods monster, or was it a book or something there
Yeah.
at the museum? And isn't that museum one of the first UFO museums?
Yeah, so it was the first first UFO museum that it was set up before the Roswell one was. it was set up like a decade before the Roswell one was, which is, I think it was in like off the top of my head, I think it was Roswell one was in the early 90s, and then this one was in like the late 70s, early 80s. I'd have to double check that. But yeah, it was actually set up before the Roswell one. For whatever reason, UFOs are really, really popular here in Japan. There are a lot of stories about people encountering, flying saucers or extraterrestrials. So not all of it is America centric. Some of this stuff is Japanese ufology, which I did a show on this, and I'm looking right now to get the data on this, see what the research facility was. Yeah, okay. At least okay. So since the 1970s, there's a town called Iono or Ion, or excuse me, Ino, I-I-N-O, and this town has been plagued with UFO sightings. And so in this town, they have a lot of documents and replicas like the Flatwoods Monster and a lot of books on the subject. But the Roswell Research Center, this is in New Mexico, and the museum was founded in 1991, but it was not the first of its kind. A guy named Kenichi Arai, a Japanese man formerly in the military, began the first of its kind museum and research facility in 1979. So their UFO museum research facility began before the US one, which is really interesting, I think.
That is really interesting. What is Japan's like? Do they have like what would be equivalent to a Roswell incident in the United States?
Yeah, there are a lot of cases that are uniquely Japan. Like they're I don't think that they're influenced by other countries. I mean, I or like the US, I could be very, very, very wrong about that. But there definitely are cases here of strange interactions with with objects that are distinctly Japanese, but they do parallel stories that we hear around the world. For example, I think one of the most commonly recognized one is the Utsurobune, early 1800s. This boat, so it means hollow boat. This hollow boat washes up on shore. People have said it looks kind of like these large Japanese baths, these kind of like wooden baths, that maybe it was just one of those. But the story is really peculiar because this thing washes up on shore, and the fishermen there, they see it, but it's not. They would have known if it was just some wooden bath that was floating. Like this thing had a top on it, and it had inscriptions on the side, kind of like Rendlesham Forest. And there's a woman inside of it, and she has the depictions will show her having Japanese features, Eastern features, Oriental features, but she actually was described as having red hair and pale skin, which obviously is not Oriental. And inside of the container, they found like really fancy, expensive materials like textiles and other things that were things that people who are wealthy would have access to. And whatever it was never there was no answer ever given to what this thing was. So that's, I would say, one of the weird cases that is very distinctly Japan. There aren't many stories I've ever heard or read anywhere else that even come close to that. So that's a very Japanese story. I would say that I guess it's not really their Roswell, but something equivalent to the power of Roswell was back in 1972, and then there's another case in 1974. So 1972, there was an incident in Kochi Prefecture, and that incident involved, if I remember this correctly, that incident included or involved a handful of kids, two kids that saw this object land, and they go and actually get their parents, and they come back, and the parents, unlike a lot of stories where the object is gone, the parents actually see the object, and then it eventually takes off. What the kids described when they approached it originally, these beings got off of it, and that story is similar to what we read about happening elsewhere in the world. But in this case, the parents saw it, which I guess is also similar to Flatwoods because the parents supposedly saw the Flatwoods monster along with the kids. But that's considered like the main kind of Roswell central pillar of Japanese UFO mythology. I
Isn't
think is
that
that
also similar to the what country was it that Netflix did that one show on where the UFO supposedly landed in behind the school in the like playground area,
yeah,
and
yeah,
all
yeah.
the kids saw it, and supposedly the teachers seen it as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that. It's a very similar story to that. I don't think that the Utsurobune is it means hollow boat. I don't think that story is lifted or influenced. It could be, but I don't think that it is. The Because that was back in the early 1800s. It was way before modern ufology began. The 1970s case in Kochi Prefecture maybe was influenced. I don't know, but the story is similar. Maybe because it was influenced. Maybe because whatever the phenomenon is, it's universally the same thing. The beans that got off the ship made strange sounds. They kind of look like the what was it, the Hopkinsville case in Kentucky? They kind of looked like those goblin type things, what was seen in the 1970s. So
What's interesting is you're saying that this thing that washed up on the beach had like markings on
mm,
it as well, and then like you mentioned the Rendlesham Forest incident, which I not
in
for
Roswell
sure
as
on the
well.
date. And then the Roswell, people said that the ship had markings on it, and then also the Kecksburg event
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
1965. The reports
Same.
of people seeing that craft also had what was reported as like strange, like ancient Egyptian style markings on it.
That's right. Yeah, so there's a parallel there, that's I don't think that that necessarily means that there was influence between different parts of the world. I think that maybe there's a universality to the phenomena is what I think. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I just think that that's super interesting that a lot of the people that have seen these crafts like up close, like the Rendlesham Forest, where the gentleman supposedly like touched the craft,
Mhm.
and then the people that supposedly saw the Roswell incident said that there were strange markings on it as well. Then this one you're saying that, and then the Kecksburg event, where supposedly several people saw this strange craft just hovering in like a tree line, and then immediately the military was there to like confiscate it and throw it on the back of a truck and get it out of there.
Yes,
I just
yes.
think it's interesting when they see them up close, it appears to have like weird and strange markings
Writings.
on them. But I mean, of course, you can't really examine something that you see in the sky that's maybe, several feet away, and in some cases a mile away. You can't really
Mm.
see what the actual craft looks like. But
So
it seems to be whenever they see them up close, they all have these weird and strange hieroglyphic type
yeah.
Egyptian style ancient markings on them.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So there are 3 major stories in Japan. There's these are considered the 3 big incidents or the 3 big UFO cases. So there's the Kochi in 1972. That's the Kochi prefecture. There's the 1974 sightings in Hokkaido, which is the northernmost island. And then there is the Kofu, which is the capital city of Yamanashi prefecture. And I might have gotten the names mixed up. It was the Kofu UFO case with the kids, and that was in 1975. 2 boys, they saw this object fall out of the sky, and when they go to approach this object, I think it was in like a vineyard somewhere, which reminds me of some of these stories I've read in Europe where these egg objects come down in the middle of a field, a vineyard, some farmer's land, and these beings get off and they ask for like a glass of water or something like that. Or they make strange sounds like electrical sounds, beep, boop, bop, beep, boop, like a computer or something. So there's a very similar thing happened when these boys approached the object and they saw this being walking around. Um, they said that the craft was only like 7 feet high, so it was a relatively small object, and the creatures were, I'd say, relatively small, kind of like those Kentucky goblins or whatever you choose to call them. which they had replicas of at the UFO Museum as well. They had a lot about Hopkinsville. So yeah, whatever the kids saw, they said it made a noise. Like these things made noises like a Geiger counter, like picking up radiation. And it's just such a strange story because I mean this was in the 70s, so it could have been influenced by Western things, right? All those movies in the 50s and 60s. But again, if you go back to the Uthrobune, I don't think that was influenced by anything out of any other part of the world. I think that was a distinct. The point is, I guess, in relation to your question about UFOs, Eno, the town outside Fukushima, is kind of like their Roswell. That's kind of like ground zero for UFO interest. And then I would say Eno is also kind of like Sedona because they have a lot of, they talk about energy vortexes and the sacredness of the mountain and the energy coming from the mountain. So they have a Sedona, they have a Roswell, and they have these UFO cases from different parts of the country. Again, Kofu, the city, Kochi Prefecture, and Hokkaido, among others.
Yeah, that one that I was thinking of with the school was in Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe, yes.
The
yes.
aerial school UFO incident on the 16th of September 1994. There was a UFO sighting outside Rawa, Zimbabwe. 62 pupils at the aerial school, aged between 6 and 12, said they saw one or more silver craft descended from the sky and land on the field near the school. Some of the children claimed that the creature or more creatures dressed all in black and approached and telepathically communicated to them a message with an environmental theme. Oh, it's got to be an environmental theme, dude. If it's not environmental and you got to clean stuff up, then did you really even contact aliens, bro? Frightening them and
that's why I think a lot of it's a subconscious, unconscious projection of our own fears, like don't use nuclear weapons, make sure the environment's clean. These are all talking points that we have in our politics too. And the aliens are just interested in the exact same thing. I find that to be not coincidental. I think that means, like Carl Jung said, there's a deeper psychological aspect to all of this.
And John Mack was involved with this as well. He went to the school and supposedly like interviewed all the children. But the thing that screwed that whole thing up is that he interviewed them all at the same time. Right?
Yeah,
he didn't separate them in the beginning. So all the kids heard all the stories that everyone had already said. Right. And it influenced their, I mean, that's a rookie mistake. You know, like you don't interview everyone all at the same time because then
you don't just interview everybody and kind of put stories in their head to get the answer you want, or you don't reference yourself in your book like references in my book, and you read the references and there's like 1,500 of them are his other books he references.
Yeah. But I mean, it is an interesting case. It was on that Netflix docu-series about UFOs. I mean, I think it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. But there was a guy that I think came out in that documentary series, like one of the kids that is now older, and said that he just made the entire story up and then influenced all the other kids to believe in it. Which you don't really know. Who knows? But I mean, that seems more plausible, right?
Seems more plausible. And who knows if maybe he didn't make the story up, but as he got older, he started to disbelieve it and then told people he made it up. I mean, we don't know about any of this stuff. All we can do is collect information and, come up with our own opinions, but we don't know for sure. I sent you 2 links, by the way, Ryder. I sent you a link to Kyoto News about locals in Japan near Mount Fuji having this like UFO tourism craze. And then I sent you an article. Your audience should probably read this article, at least the first half of it, from Popular Mechanics. It's about some of the UFO sightings in Japan, the 3 big cases that I mentioned, Kofu, Kochi, and Hokkaido.
Yeah, let me pull this one up really quick. Oh, shit, stupid freaking pop-ups. Locals in central Japan near Mount Fuji count on UFO craze for tourism. Did you find out anything more about the UFOs that were supposedly spotted over the power plant that meltdown?
Yeah, that's another peculiar thing. I was going to mention that because the town of Eno is closer to the power plant than Fukushima is, because the town and the museum, the UFO museum, it's like 20 to 30 minutes by car east of the city. So, and it's very wooded, and it's like the Pacific Northwest. And there are sacred mountains. I mean, all the mountains here are sacred, but it's sacred mountains. I climbed one of them actually, and at the top there's another UFO kind of, um, I don't know what you would call it, not a memorial, but like a UFO, uh, I guess like a sacred site where these UFOs came down. So there's these alien statues as you go up the mountain. But yeah, the Daiichi power plant is close to the home of modern ufology in Japan, which is interesting because, yes, when the power plant melted down, there are videos of this. I can't verify every one of them, but there are videos I'm quite sure are very real. And people here, some people I spoke with up there, I'm down south now, but up there, up north, uh, talked also about, yes, after the power plant, there were UFOs sighted, flying discs, and there are videos of it. Which that also happened in Chernobyl, and that also happened after 3 Mile Island. But those cases were older. You know, people didn't have phones, and there weren't as many cameras. So after Daiichi, there definitely was UFOs or flying saucers, discs, whatever that were sighted. There were also people. Have you heard about the ghost phenomenon after the tsunami and after the power plant melted down?
No, tell us about that. It sounds super interesting.
I actually don't know much about it. I don't know if anybody knows much about it. There were just stories of people who had, like, cab drivers who had picked up, uh, people on the side of the road, take them to where they need to go, and they get there, and the person disappears, and they're gone. There's nobody in the car, and I think that again, I don't know how verifiable any of this is, but there was a small documentary on it. There were people that had uh, tried to confirm, like, thinking that they were crazy, who these people were, and it turns out they were people that had died in the disaster in that area. So that it's not just UFOs; it's also ghost sightings as well, or apparitions, or spirits, or whatever you choose to call it.
It's so
Souls.
weird that people like the benevolent extraterrestrial hypothesis that the aliens are here to help us and they're not going to let us go to nuclear war, and like they're not going to let this well, why didn't they stop the power plant from burning down?
Yeah, why
If they
didn't
were
they
already
stop?
there, why didn't they stop it?
Why didn't they stop the Enola Gay?
I
I'm
mean,
actually I'm here in Hiroshima, so why didn't the aliens stop the bomb from dropping here?
well, then they would say, oh, well, that's what alerted them to come, Ryan.
So the Trinity test didn't wake them up.
No, that didn't do anything. None of the testing that we were doing in the United States on the bombs did anything either. But whenever we actually dropped it for real, that's when they were like, "Oh no, we got to do something about it now." But they
Okay, well,
really
that was
haven't done anything about it. Like I don't really understand that angle to it at all. Like you would think that if they really were concerned about it, they would actually do something about it. But nothing has happened.
they dropped the bomb here August 6th, 1945, just after 8 a.m. So on August 9th of 1945, 3 days later, something else happened, Nagasaki. So why didn't the aliens stop that? If the
You think
Hiroshima woke them up and, oh, we have to stop. Well, why did they let 3 days passed and then they let another bomb be dropped on Nagasaki? It's all these ridiculous alien stories, man. I'm so sick and tired of hearing about it. All these excuses and justifications.
But then they'll turn around and they'll say, "Oh well, they're not actually benevolent; they're malevolent
Yes.
because they let all that stuff happen."
But then there's people
You
that would
see,
say
it's a double-edged sword, Ryan.
they have to let it happen because that's the only way we'll grow spiritually.
Yes, thousands and thousands and possibly millions of people dying. That's the only way that we can do it.
Yeah. You
Makes
look like,
sense.
with those glasses on and that shirt, you look like you could be like a cult leader a little bit.
Oh, bro, I'm on my recovering from this documentary. I'm super relaxed. This is my relaxation station
Yeah,
shirt.
I feel like I feel like I'd like a glass of Kool-Aid.
It's got lobsters on it. It's got crabs on it, corn, onions, and hot sauce, dude.
All right, that's a good cult leader shirt. You got to make up some UFO stories, get people to drink some Kool-Aid. You'll be raking in more than $3.19 a show.
Yeah, I hope so. Maybe I can bump those numbers up to $10 a show.
Yeah, maybe we can get up. Yeah.
Could have been traffic getting here. Yeah, that's right. This ties that bind you. Yep. Could have been a lot of traffic, space traffic,
Space
UFOs
traffic,
break down. They need repairs. They got to stop at other planets to refuel.
Maybe the military that operates them, they took the weekend off. Could have been that, or it could have been that they just didn't get the signal, light speed. By the time they get the signal, the bombs are already dropped. Whatever excuse makes people feel better.
But then at the same time, they're also interdimensional, Ryan. So they can actually control time. So if they really wanted to and they accidentally missed it, they could just go back to a couple of minutes before it actually happened and prevented it.
And we wouldn't
Right?
even know. We wouldn't
wouldn't
even
know.
know. So we could make some stuff up here and we could say, well, actually, they dropped 5 bombs on Japan, but the aliens fixed and corrected 3 of them. Can you prove that? No.
They've avoided World War III 20 times since World War II, bro. Don't you already know?
That's what they always say about, making these predictions of the future, right? They always talk about how because we talked about it, like David Wilcock always said that, because we talked about it, it didn't happen. Thanks to your support. Keep donating.
Because I got the information out there. They decided not to do it. The ties that bind, you want to know about this Shiziki Saki house.
No, I have not. But that's from The Grudge, right?
I don't know.
That's from The Grudge, I believe. But I have not been there. That is something. I'm going to be going to Tokyo and staying in Tokyo once I visit Osaka, Kyoto, and a couple of other cities. I'll be staying in Tokyo for about a month and a half to finish my visa, so I will probably go check that out. That's actually something that I should mark down to go see.
Good old Saki house. Has Ryan visited any of the ancient megalithic sites in Japan? Tell us about it.
Yes. You should pull this up to show people. I think I sent you a picture of it. The Ishi no Hoden. Ishi no Hoden is a rock. Hoden is the little town. It's about 20 minutes by train from Himeji, between Himeji and Kobe.
This one?
And
is it this one or no?
No. It's the it's called, you could just look it up online. It's called the Floating Rock or the Floating Stone. Or if you I can tell you what to type in, or I can just send you.
Oh yeah, just send the link.
Or if you can go to my Facebook page, I uploaded the video of it. You might want to show your listeners the video I took all the way around the object. It's one of the first posts on Facebook. But while you look that up, I'll tell people it is a site that there is no official dating. It's clearly carved out of the rock around it. And the way that it's carved, if you get down and look underneath, there's a base, obviously, but the way that it's carved, some of the base has been cut out. And so water fills in that area. And the water is very calm. So it looks like the stone is floating. And it's called the Floating Stone. It's associated with the shrine that's there. There's a shrine there dedicated to a kami of medicine. So the whole area is about medicine and health and healing. And it was a pilgrimage for people in Japan, and still is. In fact, during the pandemic, people went to Ishino Hoden to seek protection from coronavirus. I was reading that. I thought that was interesting. But it is a sacred site. It's not really a tourist attraction, but there are people that go and film there and do documentaries. I think it was on Ancient Aliens too. I think. And I spoke to the woman there at the shrine, and she told she didn't speak much English, but we spoke a little bit and then translated some on our phones. But she told me that there was an American TV crew that was just there that just filmed it for some documentary or for some show in the United States. So it's pretty popular, pretty well known, but it's about healing, and they don't really know how old this thing is and who built it. If you look at the top of it, I don't know if you're finding that video that
Yeah,
is
I
on my
got the
Facebook.
video. I'm bringing it up right now.
So in this video, I'm below. It's like 20 feet high, so you can't see it at the top. But if you look at the top and some of the other pictures you pulled up, the way that it's carved, these these smooth slants and these very rigid edges. Clearly, the people that carved this thing, for whatever the purpose was, were not entirely primitive. And I think that's important because you have something that is not really dateable. And I mean, the history here is really interesting in Japan because it's supposed to be uh, um, the native peoples up north in Hokkaido. And then you have like the different periods of Jomon and Yayoi. And there really isn't supposed to be this megalithic culture in Japan, but there are sites like this all over Japan. There are also burial mounds and large mounds, like in Ohio, the mound builders of America. You have mounds all over Japan. You have megalithic sites all over Japan. And obviously, at one point or another, Japan was connected to the mainland, maybe connected to the Korean Peninsula. So, like, there clearly is a history here in Japan, just like in the United States as a country, but just in the Americas in general, North and South and Central, and anywhere else you look in the world, Australia, Indonesia, Southeast Asia, you find that there is, like Graham Hancock has been pointing out, evidence of a lost piece of human history. And I think that this is just more evidence of that. Again, they don't say when this thing was, they don't have a date for this. It's just like it's prehistoric, it's ancient. We don't know how old it is. We can guess, but we don't know how old it is. It's too old to be dated. And it's something that is clearly showing that not only did people have the means and the know-how to do this, but you have to have, I would assume you'd have to have some level of language and culture. Why would you do this? There has to be another reason. They don't just carve a stone like this out of the surrounding rock for no reason. And it probably isn't some silly primitive reason. Like, it's probably connected to some spiritual practice. Later on, they say that this was the location where certain gods came down to earth. So, and that's probably, I would assume that's probably universal, going back to whenever this thing was carved, that it was maybe a kind of like the Nazca lines, or the place maybe where the gods came down to earth or landed, and they made the lines to encourage the gods to come back, or people think it's like a runway or something for alien UFOs or something like that. But my point is, this thing is very old. They don't know exactly how old it is. It's associated with healing. You could also call it the healing stone or the floating stone. It's associated with the gods. It's a very interesting site. So yes, that's the main megalithic thing that I've visited so far.
What's really
There's
interesting is it looks like that it's cut out of one singular stone.
Yeah, if you look at some of the pictures, and you can kind of tell in the video I made, it's cut, especially from the very top. If you walk up the hill, it's definitely cut from the surrounding rock. Like they kind of quarried this area and then carved this thing out of the rock. No
That's
easy task.
wild. How big do you think this thing is? It's huge.
20 feet tall, roughly 20 feet tall. And I mean, it's probably, I don't know what they estimate the weight to be. If you kind of look down below too, you can see how it was from beneath. They cut a lot of it from beneath, so it looks like it's floating to give it that impression. Which there's also a shrine on Miyajima Island here. I'm in Hiroshima now, and you go to Miyajima Island. Itsukushima is a shrine that has the torii gates that look like they're floating in the water, and the shrine looks like it's floating in the water until low tide. So that's actually a common motif here in Japan, is to blend together temples and shrines, the symbols of the gods, the deities, the spirits, whatever you choose to call them, the kami, and the man-made world and the natural world help them to blend together and come together in harmony.
Yeah, that's just really wild that it looks like the thing was like there wasn't anything that was cut and like put together. It was just literally cut out of a one giant rock. Did you actually look up underneath it to make sure it wasn't some kind of magic or something? To make
Kind of
sure it wasn't really floating?
some kind of alien levitation.
Yeah, some kind of anti-gravity rock.
Yeah, I did look underneath of it. It's carved. It's not alien. It's not alien technology.
That's what I would have. That's the first thing that I would have done. But I just like to make sure. You know what I mean? Like, I went to a
Yes.
festival a couple of weeks ago, and they had a wrestling ring set up, and no one was around it or anything. And I always wanted to know, like, how much padding is like. How is a wrestling ring made? Like, are they really taking like hardcore hits when they're slammed? And they are, dude. It's like a freaking half inch of foam on top, like with a mat on top of that, and then nothing but 2x4s underneath it.
Mm.
I was like, holy crap, these people really are getting slammed on the mat when they get slammed. But I like to know how things like work and like operate and take a little look see for myself. So I'm glad you did look up underneath it.
I did a little upskirt of the Ishinohoden.
Yeah.
There's I think that there's a lot of I'm sure you'd agree with me. There's a lot of sentiment today that, like, personally, I don't really understand how cars work, but I have friends that do. I don't understand how, I don't understand how this hotel I'm in right now is standing. I don't understand engineering, especially because this morning there was a minor earthquake and I woke up to the bed shaking. I was like, holy crap, this is this kind of freaky. I've only had one experience like that in my life, but I was thinking, how does this building stand? I don't really understand. I don't get. So my point is, for people that are not engineers, for people that are not car mechanics, it might seem like magic, right? And so if you look at a city, or if you look at a big building in the city individually, or if you look at, I don't know, anything that is constructed today, like underwater tunnels or suspension bridges, just imagine if maybe in 100 years from now, people were to look back and they were to say, well, we don't know how those things were made, so it must have been aliens. It's basically because you're not trained as an engineer, you don't know how a suspension bridge works, it must have been aliens, which is a really lazy way to explain things. It's like, well, we don't know how this rock was carved. So rather than it being some lost human civilization or lost human technology, aliens probably carved it. And although it looks like rock, it's really an anti-gravity device underneath of it holding the rock up.
Yeah, just like this link that you just sent me. This rock. This is a rock spaceship, dude.
Yes, the rock spaceship, Masuda no Iwafune. Yeah, I don't think there's any explanation for that at all. I've seen that on the History Channel, and I think that's on Ancient Aliens too. But look at that thing. The way that it's carved, it reminds you of like Machu Picchu. It reminds you of these South American structures that are carved. Very similar in terms of how clean cut. I mean, I've not been there yet, and I didn't have if I was, I don't have like a measuring gauge, but by the looks of the photographs and from the people that have been there that have talked about it, it's very similar to those like H-shaped cuts in South America. Very, very fine cuts.
Okay, so if you were to stand, let's imagine we just stood this up. It kind of would look like a face, like the two holes, like would be like eyes, and this part down here is like the rest of the face.
Could be a face. It also kind of, if you don't look at the top of it, like where those the cuts are, it almost looks like it could be a bunker. I don't think, I could be wrong. Like, again, I don't know anything about this. I haven't visited the location, but I was thinking maybe, remember the Easter Island heads at Rapa Nui when they dug down underneath of them and they had bodies?
Yeah, they thought that they were just heads, but they were like super huge, very tall.
Yes, so maybe this is a larger structure, maybe, and if I have no idea. I'm not speaking as an expert on this, Maybe it's a larger structure. Maybe it was part of a larger complex, and it was so ancient that there isn't anything else left. Like a lot of this, there could be other ones buried. Like there are other sites near Göbekli Tepe that are buried. They've only gone through like what, a very small percentage of that whole area in Turkey. It's the same thing here in Japan. And there's overwhelming, abundant evidence that we are, without a doubt, missing a large piece of human history. And I do not think it has to do with aliens.
What it kind of reminds me of is like, especially with like sometimes it looks like it's flooded, and then other times it looks like it's not flooded. That's kind of like what the Germans did with some of their bases and some of their underground bases before the war was over. They just flooded the entire base so that nobody could get into them.
Isn't that what they did with the Montauk Project? They filled in all the ventilation shafts with concrete.
Concrete.
Hey, I heard
there is a really interesting hospital though in Germany that happened to. I forget what the name of the hospital is. I would have to look it up, but it was like this giant, huge hospital, and apparently they were doing like, I mean, of course, it's like folklore and like mythology to boost up the story and make it seem like it's something that it may not have actually have been. But supposedly they were doing like horrific experiments and stuff down there and trying to create animal human chimeras or whatever, hybrids or whatever, and then they ended up flooding. Like there was like 4 or 5 different levels to this hospital, and they flooded all of those levels, and like no one can get access to it or like get to it anymore. There's been supposedly a few divers that have like tried to go down, but they can only get down to a certain point, because then you just start kicking up like a bunch of like mud and like dirt and stuff, and it makes it impossible for them to be able to see.
How, it's 5 stories or 5 levels?
Something like that. Yeah, it's been a long time since I heard the story. It wouldn't take me long to figure it out, but I'll find it and I'll send it to you when the show is over. But
I don't think
interesting.
I don't think I've heard of that, but it kind of rings a bell. Kind of sounds familiar. There's also
it's almost like a creepypasta story, almost, sort of. You know what I mean?
Yes. There's something else I think you should probably. There's 2 things I think you should show. If you go to my Facebook page, or here, I'll tag you in both of these on Facebook so you can go right to them. There's most of the Shinto shrines here are closed off. You don't see the sacred images inside, or the central part of the temple. Buddhism's a little different because they have like statues of Buddha. Sometimes it's closed off, but I want to send you, or I tagged you in that link with the Shinto shrine on Facebook, and then I want to tag you in this one so you can easily find it. There's a shrine in Hiroshima that was completely destroyed when the atomic bomb was dropped. But even though the shrine was destroyed, the torii gates survived. And not just kind of, the gates survived almost completely intact. And there was virtually no damage at all done to them. And they are, along with the lanterns, the pillars, like the candles, or the 2 thieves of Christ, the guardian pillars. There's these 2 lanterns in front, and they're almost untouched, and they're very, very close to the hypocenter of where the bomb detonated. So it's kind of like when there's a tornado and it leaves one house standing, or kind of like, a church is undamaged and people say God protected the church. Well, when the atomic bomb was detonated over Hiroshima, very close to the hypocenter, here's the shrine. The shrine's completely destroyed, but the gateway to the shrine was protected almost by the hand of God. So I tagged you in those.
Right here it is.
Yep. That is the Gokoku, which usually means like a shrine dedicated to all the people who have died for the country. It's an old shrine. It's a couple 100-year-old shrine. It might be older than that, but it was less than 1 kilometer from the explosion hypocenter. And
Yeah, that's the one that
seeing
I commented on and said that it sound. Hey, here I am. Is Goku named
Oh, yeah,
after
Dragon
this
Ball
from
Z.
Dragon Ball Z?
Actually, the other one I tagged you in is another Gokoku shrine. It is in Himeji. It's by the Himeji Castle, and you can see inside this shrine. I think it's really important to look at this image because you don't see. First of all, you don't know much about Shintoism even in Japan. Like people just know it as a cultural thing. They're not religious about it. It's not really a lot of religion in Japan, despite all the Buddhism and the Shinto shrines and the Buddhist temples. But if you go in the West and you want to find out about Shintoism or something, you can learn about Buddhism. But Shintoism is virtually non-existent anywhere in literature. You can't really learn anything about it. But when you do, there's a few books that have been written by Japanese people that kind of like priests, but not really priests, because they don't really have the same kind of, I guess, cultural, religious customs. Like there's no founder to Shintoism. There's no holy books. Anyway, my point is, if you look at this image I tagged you in of the shrine with the mirror, do you have that image?
I don't see. I only got one tag from you.
I'll try to tag you again. If you scroll up from the Torii gates, you'll see the image of the mirror.
Oh, here it is.
So I just wanted to show people this because I think it's important.
Okay, pulling it up now, baby. There it is.
So that is in one of the Gokoku shrines, and that's Himeji, right by the Himeji Castle. So if you look inside of it, you can't always see inside most of the shrines because they're closed off. At least, especially the inner sanctum of the shrine is closed off. But you see that there's a mirror there. See the mirror? Zoom in.
Oh yeah, right here.
Yeah, the mirror. So people might think if you were to look at a Christian church, Gothic cathedral, Catholic church, there's always a Jesus or there's a cross, or a Virgin Mary, Madonna. There's always something as the central image of veneration, what you pray to. And in Buddhism, you have the golden Buddha, right? You pray to Buddha. Now, symbolically, it's not really that you're praying to Mary or that you're praying to Jesus. You might think that you are, okay, but it's a symbolic representation of something. So you're directing your attention toward Jesus or toward Mary or toward Buddha, because they are symbols of resurrection, of symbols of perfection, transfiguration. Because, the story of Jesus is very similar to the story of Buddha. Jesus is crucified on a cross. Buddha is obtaining enlightenment under the bo tree. Even Odin is hanged on the tree, has a spear piercing his side. And so Buddha is then, as he's under the bo tree, he's tempted by what amounts to the devil, Kalamara. And Jesus is also what? Tempted by the devil in the Bible. Buddha, when he obtains enlightenment, questions whether or not people will understand. And Dharma, the creator, says, trust people, basically trust people and they will understand. And so Buddha, he goes and spreads his message. Very kind of similar to Jesus when he's on the cross and he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's a very similar relationship between the Jesus and Buddha story. Joseph Campbell writes beautifully about this in A Hero with 1,000 Faces, and he talks about the relationship between the two. Not necessarily pointing it out, but making it obvious through the book. It's the hero's journey, the dark night of the soul, stuff like that. So in Shintoism, it's different. There isn't like a golden idol. And I had a few people tell me, Shintoism, that's pagan, it's heathen. And I thought, I think Joseph Campbell is the only person I've ever heard say this. And I thought this when I first started studying Shinto in Japan. I thought, Japan is a weird place. Japan is like one of the only places in the world where the secret teachings, if you will, are preserved as part of the very foundation of the cultural pseudo-religious basis of the country. Like Shinto shrines are everywhere. You go to a 7-Eleven, you see a bank, You see a grocery store, and then there's a shrine, and then there's another shrine, and then there's like a park, and then there's like, an alleyway, and there's like a school, and then there's another shrine. And so this shrine's 500 years old. That one's 1,000. This one's 200 years old. This one's 50 years old. They're all over the place. It's just part of the nature of this country and the culture. So, but my point is, people might think it's heathen, but really, like Joseph Campbell pointed out, it's kind of the opposite. It's very pure. It's almost like a pure form of Christianity. It's almost like a pure form of even Buddhism, although the two are intertwined here. And what I mean by pure is that when you look at that mirror, you're looking at that mirror, Ryder. What do you see back? You see your own reflection. That's
That's
what
right.
you're praying to. You're not praying to the Buddha. You're not praying to Jesus Christ or Mary Magdalene or Mary. You're not praying to the Madonna, to Isis. Those are just symbols to help you understand, like on
Who
a
you
deeper
are. Yeah.
who you are. Yeah, yeah. And that's what the mirror represents. So Shintoism preserves that element. There's no religious texts. There are people that preside over the shrines, like priests and priestesses, and they do rituals and chants. But yeah, there's no religious books. There's no founder. There's no doctrine. There are no 10 commandments. But if you have committed an offense like murder, there are purification rituals for all offenses, whether you steal something. Not that you can go steal and then just purify yourself and you're okay. These are considered like bad things. Otherwise, in Shinto, the world is pure, the world is good. And when you do bad things, you purify yourself and ask, essentially, you're asking for forgiveness. You're cleansing yourself of the impurities. So it's kind of baked into Shinto that you don't murder, you don't lie, you don't steal. They don't need a list of commandments to know not to do those things. So like Campbell said, it is a very, I forget the exact words he used because I don't have the book where he wrote it. It was one of his Eastern journals, but it's a very pure form of, I would say it's the purest form of Christianity. Honestly, people can yell at me and scream at me and tell me that, but it's a very pure form of Christianity as far as I'm concerned.
Well, not only that, Krishna is pretty much exactly like Jesus as well. You got Horus, same thing as Jesus. Like there's so many of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the figures throughout almost every religion has the same type of Jesus figure. And if I'm not mistaken, I seen a post about this earlier. Not 100% if it's true because I didn't follow up on it yet. But supposedly, the Pope came out and said that all these religions do the same thing. They all lead to God. Which
Yeah, they're different
I don't know
languages.
if that's true. I don't know if he actually said that. That's why I'm giving the preface there because I haven't checked it out yet. But I seen a post and I was like, well, that's what people have been saying for a really long time now. Like, and you're just now catching on,
Yeah, I mean, there are zealots in religions. This is actually something I think that you probably like to hear, and the audience would like to hear. I've noticed a lot of people here are not religious. You don't need religion to have a decent, modest culture. Japan is a great example of that because there really isn't religion here, but people are decent and modest. And crime is extremely low. There are many reasons for that. One is conformity. Another one is just the nature of the culture. There's a lot of reasons. But I've noticed in speaking to a lot of Buddhists, the Buddhists here are way different than the Buddhists in America. I'm not faulting somebody for being a Buddhist and bettering themselves, but I've noticed the Buddhists here are truly open-minded. Like people here are way more open-minded than anywhere I've ever been in my life. Like if you express an opinion, like I was talking to this person about they were Buddhist, and I said, the Buddhist story is very similar to Jesus, and like I just explained to you, Ryder. And you know what they said to me? They said, yeah, you're right. It is very similar to Jesus. It's basically, it's kind of like the same thing. We just, it's just another way of looking at it. I was thinking like, man, if I said that to a Christian, I would have been crucified. I said, Buddhists have a much different view of the world, obviously. And I think that, when you look at different religions, a lot of it is just it's similar, but a lot of the fighting is it's the zealotry, it's the ego, it's the emotion, it's the I'm right, you're wrong, which is not really what any religion is about. That's not even what Islam is about. People don't understand, I guess, that Islam means to submit. It does mean submit, but it doesn't mean submit to, the Islamic State or terrorism or some stupid crap like that. It means Islam means submission to God. That's all that it means. Christians would agree with that, right? Submit to God, fear God. It's the same thing. It's just it's literally a different language. Like Allah means God, right? You submit to Allah. That's a heathen God. That's a God of terrorism and a God of jihad. It's like, do you even know what those words mean? It means submit to God. It's all that it means. It's the same thing as Christianity, and the Muslims have a way, Christians have a way in the truth and light and life, and the Buddhists have a way. Buddha famously walked the middle path. All the Shinto shrines, they have the pillars, and you saw the inside the shrine, the two lanterns and the two lights, and it's a central walkway, like Jesus crucified between the two thieves. These are universal themes. I think that if you really want to understand them, you should read A Hero with a Thousand Faces and understand the hero's journey. That is probably the best way to really understand what any of this stuff is. Joseph Campbell's work is incredible.
Yes, I guess Pope Francis did indeed say that all religions is a path to God. Pope Francis stirs controversy with interreligious remarks. Pope Francis prompted controversy Friday with remarks in an interreligious meeting in Singapore that some have taken as a departure from the Catholic doctrine as a role as Jesus Christ in salvation. This is a quote from Pope Francis, all religions are a path to reach God. They are. I make a comprehension like all different languages, different idioms to get there, but God is God for everyone. Pope Francis told the gathering of young people September 13th at an interreligious meeting at the Catholic Junior College in Singapore, according to the text of the speech published by the Vatican. So he did, in fact, say it. Yeah, I think that's a right move.
Was that today?
Yeah, today.
Wow. Can you send me that?
Yeah.
Please. Well, so I think that's really interesting for a different reason, because Catholicism means universal. So it means that Catholicism was supposed to be a universal religion, the universal religion, kind of like the one world religion. So if Pope Francis is acknowledging that, he's just acknowledging what Catholic means. But my opinion would be that he's probably saying that because I think that several popes, but him especially, they've been working toward dismantling the Catholic Church. So although he says it's all pretty much the I think that's a way to kind of demean Catholics and strip away the significance of Catholicism for many people. That's just my opinion, but that's really interesting. I did not read that. I'll have to throw that in the show. Thank you.
Yeah, I just sent it to you in the private chat. But the Catholic Church has made a lot of steps to modernize their viewpoints here. Basically aimed at a new generation of people that do not like Christianity or that do not like religion. So therefore, they're starting to encompass more worldly things into it, like the LGBTQ community. But I'm pretty sure Pope Francis came out in support of them at one time or another, and then with him coming on and saying, "Oh well, if an extraterrestrial shows up, we'll baptize the extraterrestrial. He'll be saved in the blood of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ." And then also with
what a ridiculous thing that is, though, to say that we will baptize an extraterrestrial in the blood of Jesus Christ. You think an extraterrestrial gives a damn about Jesus Christ?
I know.
So stupid.
Yeah, I've often made the comment as like, well, if you were on a completely different planet, let's say you're not on Earth, like, do you think that you would, still worship Jesus? Like, is Jesus only confined to Earth?
Jesus created everything, Ryder. He created the whole universe.
It's a. I mean, you can't really say that did he go to every single planet where there's supposedly life on and
Simultaneously.
incarnate there and then also die there as well and was crucified there? It doesn't make any sense.
It makes sense if you just suspend suspend reality and logic. He was on all the planets all at once, being crucified everywhere all at the same time. And if you don't believe that, then you worship the devil. That's simple.
What a man. That is a
Yeah.
man's man right there to be on all the planets at the same time, taking one for the team, dying for
I don't
everyone's sins at the exact same time.
all the ET sins, those body parts they collect in New Mexico. I
Yeah.
think that I think it's strange when anybody, it doesn't matter what the religion is, when anybody just can't acknowledge that there are similarities, especially if you're like Christian, because you're supposed to be about acceptance and turning the other cheek and peace. At least that's what they say. That's what they believe. I think there's different ways to interpret it, but that's what they believe. So if that's the case, you should be trying to figure out what you have in common with other people, not what you have different. You know, and that's the problem with Catholicism. It's a Roman created religion. It's a state created religion. It's not real Christianity. It's an abomination of Christianity, I think.
I think so too. And there's so much proof that the entire New Testament was just completely fabricated and written by the Roman Empire. Like it's that there was never anybody named Jesus. Jesus is a completely made up name, which is very true. I mean, vowels weren't created until roughly around 500 years after the Bible was written. So it's impossible for his name to be Jesus.
Well, it wouldn't have been because of the original Aramaic and the original Hebrew anyway. It would have been, you know, Yeshua, and of course Jesus. Jesus comes from Isis, or like Zeus, Isis. So for sure, that's not even debatable. I don't think in any circle it's not debatable. But I think that I wanted to show you the Shinto stuff, not because I say I practice Shinto, but I think Shinto is just a way of life. Like, it's not a religion. It's just a way of understanding and a way of looking at the world and preserving the things that are good and purifying from the things that are bad and stuff like that. But I show you that because I think that it demonstrates that while an idol might be at the center of all these other religions, in Shinto you look in the mirror and it shows you that, you know, you're the Christ, you're the Buddha, and that's what those stories are talking about. That's what it's about, going on the hero's journey, going within and without yourself, and fighting the demons and the ogres and the monsters, overcoming them, and then obtaining whatever it is that you obtain at the end of the journey, the philosopher's stone or the gold guarded by the dragon. This is more psychological and symbolic than it is, I think it's clear, but than it is literal.
Yeah, it's a really symbolic thing to put a mirror inside of all the shrines, you know, because it's like even if you don't know that, even if you don't know it's about an inner journey and who you're praying to is you, and you're responsible for the way that you act and the things that you do, and you are the one that is going to give yourself the things that you want, not some external force. Even if you didn't know that, a smart and intellectual person could look at one of these shrines and see the mirror in the center of it and realize that they could get that symbolically without actually having to know it.
Yes. I mean, even the Buddha. I mean, the Buddha, people say, well, it's a golden idol. Well, that's not what it's supposed. You're not worshiping the golden idol. You're using the idol as an, just like you use the Virgin Mary, or just like you you put a Jesus on a cross thing in your house, a picture, or you have a little crucifix. You put that in your house. You pray, or a church. You pray toward that. And if you want to talk about idols, virtually every church has an idol. You know, the idea of the idol, though, is not necessarily a bad thing. It's about using it as a visual aid to assist in the directionalizing of your thoughts. And that's what the golden Buddha is about. That's what the mirror is a great representation of. And furthermore, when it comes to the mirror and reflecting back, um, I mean, what is that? It's self-reflection, right? It's self-reflection, which is what the moon is, a symbol of reflection, right? Because it reflects sunlight. That's why the moon was called Jehovah. The moon was God, self-reflection. God reflected on the waters and then created all things. I mean, that's the black and white God of the Jews. It's a universal concept, just with different languages and different cultures. We just do things a little differently, but we're all talking about the same thing for sure. Do you have any other? I know we're probably running out of time. Do you have any other questions or things you want to talk about?
No, I think that's a good place to wrap up. Thanks so much, Ryan. I appreciate you. And that's what makes this, that, what Pope Francis just said today, that all the religions all are a path to God. That's what makes it so fascinating. It's pretty much exactly like what we're talking about. And it's kind of shocking that he finally came out and said something like that. But Ryan, thank you very much for coming on. Can you let people know where to find you online?
Yep. The website is 3Ws.thesecretteachings.info. And you'll find the free archive on the website. You'll find my books. You'll find, if you want to subscribe to the ad-free show, you'll find that link on the website as well. You can listen to the show for free in that archive, or there are links to like Spreaker, Apple, anywhere else you listen to shows. And that would include, if you listen to groundzero.radio, you'll hear the show Monday through Friday right after Clyde on Ground Zero, Clyde Lewis Ground Zero. And then my email, of course, lastly, if you want to ask me questions or if you want to share something with me for future shows or whatever the case is, it is rdgable@yahoo.com. That's rdgable @yahoo.com. Thanks for having me on, Ryder.
I very much enjoyed it. Always an honor and a privilege to have you on, brother. And I hope everyone else enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone in the chat. Really appreciate your time and contributing to the conversation here this evening. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel in the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications, and become a Ryder Ranger channel member like Susan has done here. And you'll get access to bonus episodes. Thank you guys very much. And the links to Ryan's information will be in the description of this video. Thank you guys, and we'll see you all next time. Please leave us a comment in the comment section to let us know what you thought about tonight's episode. Thank you guys. See you all next time. Bye-bye.